Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is May 8th, 2024. A good morning from not only myself, but we have good old Weather Center Willow here who's joining us for the live stream. She decided, oh, you're going to do a morning tropical update? I want to see in on this and see exactly what goes on. So we have good old Weather Center Willow, the official Weather Center mascot, here just hanging out with us this morning. If you guys don't mind, she's going to oversee in case she has to take the helm every once in a while in my absence. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. We're going to be doing another tropical update and looking across the Caribbean, the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico. There goes Willow photo bombing, or I should say video bombing us with Cat behind. She's going to go get a little more butter off of my plate. I just tried to inhale breakfast and sip coffee before getting in here. So, to kind of give you an overview of what we're looking at today, truthfully, it does not seem like things are really going to get ramping up here over the next couple of weeks. To tell you the truth, I'm starting to lose confidence, to tell you the truth. As Super Charas has already eloquently mentioned in the chat, I really am starting to think we might just remain fairly quiet in the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, up until the start of hurricane season. Preseason activity here on the Atlantic side of things just doesn't seem to be doing it. We had some signals last weekend. We had some stuff to digest on Monday. Other weather sources are starting to pick up on this, and they're also briefing it to their viewers, and I think maybe that is what more or less triggered Mother Nature to withdraw. At first, she was thinking, okay, let's get ready to stretch our legs, do some warm-up reps, and now all of a sudden, a big old nothing burger, as Ryan Hall would say on his channel. We still have quite a bit of moisture out there, though, that's for sure. You can see we have just one solid, definitive area of dry air that's right over top the southern state, or the southern portion of Florida. We're starting to get some influx from our low-latitude jet, the subtropical jet that's just been there for centuries now, it feels like. We're finally getting a little bit of a push of moisture. That's also what's helping to intensify some of the lingering thunderstorm activity and fire up some early morning thunderstorm activity, it looks like, for the likes of eastern Kansas, western Missouri, fueling the severe weather threat that we saw as this upper low at the very topmost portion of this satellite image kicked off yesterday. We had some powerful tornadoes in Michigan, of all places. Michigan has not really seen a whole lot of action in our severe weather season, and I had a few folks reaching out to me on TikTok, and I felt humbly satisfied and thankful that I can look at weather and interpolate it quickly for some of the messages out there, because there's someone who faithfully follows me on TikTok, and they kept asking, how does southern Michigan look today? How does southern Michigan look today? Looks different. And I said, yes, it does look different. I think we have a greater chance for tornadoes up there, unfortunately, in comparison to the last few storm systems where the threat was confined predominantly to Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and further south from there. So that was another destructive night. Tornado season is really giving us a clue as to how active hurricane season could possibly be. Tornado season has just been off the chain, to tell you the truth. Ever since we hit late April and moving on, it's just been tornadoes, outbreak, outbreak, outbreak. Social media is on fire, and so on and so forth. But I know you guys didn't come in here to talk tornadoes, so let's get back to the tropics. The Sunshine State is going to embrace that name 100% today and the next couple of days. We're shooting for high temperatures upwards of the mid to upper 90s. Summertime is literally trying to sneak in the back door, despite spring being the one that's dominating the environmental pattern across North America and the Northern Hemisphere. We also have dry air that's tucked in across the Bahamas, Cuba, Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and unfortunately, I saw that Kevin had dropped in the chat a little bit ago that they've already experienced some pretty rampant flooding out there in Puerto Rico, and it looks like that same area of just training thunderstorm activity has now moved on to our U.S. British Virgin Islands, trying to push towards the Leeward Islands of the Lesser Antilles. It's a small pocket of upper-level convection, and it looks like it's predominantly being sparked off because we have this area of confluence, it looks like, in the pattern right there, a very weak area, maybe remnants of the front that's headed towards Europe, Northern Africa at this point, on the right-hand portion of your chart. Some energy left behind by that, and as we've talked about with the Saharan dust layer, with that dry air intruding on the back side of it, it helps to actually intensify these thunderstorms. You can still get a clear indication of that. Let me move my head. can still get a clear indication of that in our MDR, where you can see our intertropical convergence zone does seem like it's trying to sneak a little bit further to the north. It looks like the western extent of it is now impeding on the Guyanas out there in northern South America headed towards Venezuela. We're starting to see that little bit of a kinking in it, even though it's only been a few days since we started to investigate that. But you can still see how the dry air that's left over off of Western Africa is helping to intensify some of our moisture and our thunderstorm activity out there in the central and eastern ITZZ. Nothing really with our easterly waves, no tropical waves out there, just all overall convergence that's going to continue and persist for much of May and possibly into June. We may not see our wave train amp up until maybe later June, depending on how well our Climo models verify. And we've really seen an increase in moisture in the East Pac and right over Central America, Colombia especially. Lots of really good garden variety thunderstorms firing over the mountains, the lower terrain features out there. And that's about it, to tell you the truth. We don't really have anything on the immediate horizon. Our models are even getting wishy-washy in terms of whether or not we're going to get some activity in the eastern Pacific tropics. We have about 6 or 7 more days before we start to initiate those NHC deadlines or bulletins, and we can start reading their discussions and discussing exactly what's going on out there and see if we get any of those famous yellow blips to see what happens. But right now, to tell you the truth, we were going like this, and the interwebs were getting excited, and now we're seeing that classic tropical flow. We ebbed up, and now we're flowing back down, and I'll show you exactly why. Let's move on now. Good morning to those of you who are joining us. Supercharas, Chris Mazel, Zenful, or Zen Supercharas once again, Judy Tokos, Mick and Marley, Thomas Dellinger, Hydra 47, Daniel Lawson. Thank you all very much for joining us today. This is a look at our dust layer, or our dry air out there. And you can see that even though we have quite a bit of Saharan dust that's moving across the Caribbean up into the Lesser Antilles, trying to get into the eastern extent of the Caribbean, getting into the Greater Antilles, a lot of it is more confined to the central western MDR, where we did see a bit of a cooling trend, but it's already starting to rebound. We're starting to see that dust slowly but surely taper off. We're getting some more of that UV radiation, the sunlight down to the surface of the water, and we're starting to see those temperatures slowly rebound. I'll show you the 7-day temperature change chart here in a little bit. Lots of dry air, still indicative of where our jet stream is and why it is that the Atlantic typically doesn't start cooking until July, August, and September. We're still in that springtime pattern, so a lot of our jet streams are still going to trough ridge, and with our subtropical jet still acting up because El Nino is, I guess, like a glimmer at this point. We're still seeing residual influence from El Nino crashing and burning. We still have a lot of wind shear out there, and that could perhaps be why our models, despite MJO and wave propagation occurring over Central America and the Eastern Pacific, why they're kind of trending down today. Even our probabilities have dropped just a tad. This is a look at our overall sea surface temperatures valid for the 6th of May, so a little behind, nothing too crazy. Tropical Atlantic, goes without saying, we're still very hot. We're still at that 26, if not greater degree Charlie to support that tropical development, but as we all know and we've heard echoed across the spectrum, we need more than that. We can't just have heat and we're good to go. The Pacific side of things has really heated up, and this blob here indicates upwards of 30 plus degrees Celsius waters out there. So again, our models are going back and forth, and they always do that. They tend to windshield wiper a lot, not only with tracks, but with just overall development, generation, movement, etc. And overall, we have more favorable conditions out there in the East Pac than we do in our southern and western Caribbean, and I really do believe that we've jinxed ourselves personally, guys. Just understanding how the patterns work and how Mother Nature operates, I really do believe that we jinxed ourselves. I'm starting to see a lot of folks on Facebook, on X, on, even YouTube, starting to see the sources who love to talk tropics really bringing light to preseason activity and big stuff kicking off, and it's like, well, it looks like we're starting to backpedal a little bit. We're slowing down, which is a good thing, technically, especially as Kevin has already mentioned in the chat. There's a lot of folks out there who are not ready for tropical season, and I would best believe that there's probably a lot of us here in the United States who have not started to take advantage of stuff in terms of the tax-free holidays, Hurricane Preparedness Week and all that. We have 2 tax-free holidays coming up. I was out there which was a godsend, a fantastic day to be in the weather center with the likes of Chief Meteorologist Tom Terry and Meteorologist George Waldenberger. Fantastic job, or not fantastic job, but a fantastic opportunity and excellent rapport conversation that we had, talking hurricane season, talking what's going to happen potentially in May and June, looking at different parameters that could help to excite the tropics a little bit more as we move into the first half or the first quarter of it. So definitely exciting day yesterday. That's why I didn't go live. I got home fairly late, and I had one more final exam to do. We're finally done with the school semester until summer, so I'm very thankful that's freed up my schedule for at least just under a month. I have that much more time to dedicate to you guys and my extracurricular studying of tropical and other severe weather meteorology. This is our ocean heat content, and to tell you the truth, I've noticed that there have been some folks sharing the ocean heat content charts out there on social media, and I don't know where they're getting it from or which one they're typically looking at, but this does not look as impressive as some of the charts out there that I've been seeing. This is still, worrisome, to tell you the truth, because if you look, we still have our hottest waters right there in the Caribbean where we could possibly see early season, if not preseason activity. Our MDR is warming up as we speak, as it is expected to do so as we move closer and closer to summertime. But I've seen other charts that have been posted for April and May, and it's just red everywhere. And I would like to know where it is they're getting that stuff from, because looking at the information here, it just does not, I don't see what they're seeing. I see this here, but this is the depth of the 20-degree isotherm, so that is not as huge of a role in our tropics. This here is our mixed layer depth, which is obviously going to be where our waters are more uniform in temperature, and you can see MDR definitely really, really warm and mixed well. Caribbean is starting to get there, but I still have not seen where it is that some of these weather sources are pulling the big charts that are really showing off how hot the water is out there. I mean, let's see. Maybe we can... Nope, that's sea surface temp. That's mixed layer. 26-degree isotherm. Even the 26-degree isotherm is definitely starting to unveil itself a little bit more, so gain a little bit more depth right around that general area that we're going to see the Weather Center not propagating, but monitoring closely for that development across the hurricane season. Caribbean is definitely warming up. The Gulf of Mexico is definitely getting there. The Gulf of Mexico, as a matter of fact, if we go back up here to our sea surface temperature, the Gulf of Mexico is hot. The Gulf is ready to rock and roll now as well. There were some folks I know in previous live streams on here and on other tropical pages mentioning that the Gulf was too cold or hasn't started to warm up. Well, we definitely have very hot high pressure. We have subtropical ridging, a high height center that's building in over Mexico, Central America, and that is definitely going to help to radiate in some heat and kind of turn on the switch, let the Gulf of Mexico really start to heat up in the oven for all intents and purposes. This is where we are with El Nino. I've been seeing some folks also mentioning El Nino out there, and I'm not too sure why. We have lingering influences from our strong El Nino. That's a guarantee, but El Nino is gone. In all reality, we still have above 0.5 degree anomalies out there for the Enzo 4, but it's the Enzo 3-4 that we're looking at here. This is our Nino 3-4 index. This is where, through climatology and through careful observation and studying, we have determined this region in specific is what gives us our greatest influence brought on by La Nina or El Nino. And as you can see, we're right on the threshold of sneaking down into that just flat-out neutral point in the season, or in the oscillation, I should say. We're definitely, I would even argue that this is no longer a warm neutral. Warm neutral would be more so around like 0.3, 0.4, getting closer to a weak El Nino at that 0.5. You could say that this is a marginal warm neutral, but on the same token, we're here. We came from up here, plus 1.3, 1.2, definitely a moderate intensity El Nino. We snuck back up and peaked towards the back end of March, early April, and now we're down here. So climate models are definitely verifying really well. This is a wonderful tool, a wonderful example to kind of look at if you wanted to initialize how our climatology models have been doing for my folks out there who still don't put a lot of faith or allegiance in them. This is definitely verified incredibly well. And we've been talking on this channel since before February 14th, since about the November-December timeframe, that April was going to be a pivotal month, and we nailed it right on the head. So did our climatology models. As soon as we rolled into April, we saw the overall collapse. We saw a little bit of oscillation for sure, but it's there, it's gone. I would not even consider this El Nino anymore. And if you look at 3 and 1.2, we're not going to, because it goes without saying, we're done with El Nino. This is our 7-day anomaly change, and you can see that there is still a little bit of residual cooling brought on by what's left of our dust layer out there, but the Gulf, and I'll zoom it in for you guys to see a little bit so we can talk more about our pivotal locations. Gulf is definitely seeing a huge warming trend. The shelf off the west coast of Florida and the Panhandle is really starting to skyrocket in temperatures. Caribbean is really starting to warm up. The entirety of the Gulf is warming up, and you can still see our blue anomalies trying to unveil themselves along our ENSO regions 1 and 2, 3, 3.4, and then 4 out here is slowly trying to cool down. But all in all, it looks like our 3, 4, our 1 and 2, and our 3 are going to continue to kind of go back and forth with all the different mixing we have going on. So that's that. There's been speculation that this cooling is going to continue. I'm not a fan of people trying to go from one extreme to another. I've been trying to dispel it as much as I can on this Facebook page I'm a part of. And the reason I keep bringing up that Facebook page is because there's over 300,000 people on that Facebook page, and it is a very active platform. It's a very active group. And the troublesome part about that is it's I would say it's probably 75 to 80% hype and fear-mongering in comparison, and maybe about 20-25% actual legitimate data. And I will go ahead and pull up my Facebook real fast and see if I get... Yeah, see, as soon as I pull it up, there's a new post. Right here. For example, let me scroll and see... Right here, only 5 hours ago, new NMME model came out and it ain't looking good at all. A little bit of sensationalism, a little bit of hype there. Another person, NMME model just came out and it's pretty obvious we'll have to watch. This is going to be a active hurricane season. Here's a rundown. Prepare for lots of landfalls. You know, this is the type of stuff we don't need. That's not what we need. And on top of that, a lot of folks who are sharing these models are not communicating it properly. I even replied to a few of the comments because someone mentioned the North American multi-model and how it just looks real bad. This looks scary. And people were asking again and again and again, what is this even showing us? What does the green mean? What does the yellow mean? And I took to the comments and said, what we're looking at here are simply moisture and precipitation anomalies. So what this tells a lot of us meteorologists and weather enthusiasts is we're going to have above average moisture. And that is a direct result of the lowering pressures that are being highlighted for much of the season, as well as the hot, the hot Atlantic waters. That's all it's showing. Yes, there are context clues that you could pull from it, but it is not a definitive chart, and I'm kind of already getting to the point of information overload, like the Emergency Operations Center out here has briefed us, the National Hurricane Center has briefed us. I'm already starting to get to the point where, as excited as I am to see what happens, it's getting overblown. We're really blowing it out of proportion. We're talking development, major stuff, and we're still only into the early periphery of May. I know time is flying, but we don't need to rush it any more than it already is. So with that being said, that segues us perfectly into what we're going to look at next. Let me move my head over again so you guys can see. We're going to look at our latest North American multi-model data. And for May, you can see La Nina creeping in. This is going to be our... Oh, whoops, let me change this. There we go. There she blows. So you can see Atlantic is definitely very hot. Thea Elba, welcome in. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's very good to see you in the chat. So... That's my Thea, guys, Elba Nazario from Puerto Rico. So she's watching out there alongside you, Kevin, if you're still in the chat. I'm not too sure if you are. I haven't seen your name pop up. One thing that is of growing concern, to me anyways, and a few others, is our ensemble, not our ensembles, well, I mean, you could technically say this is one of the ensembles. Our Climo and our seasonal models are starting to indicate that our La Nina might not get as strong as early as we were initially anticipating. You could see that by July, and then by August, we do have lots of cool anomalies out there along the western coast of South America, Central America. But looking at the actual statistical and hard data in terms of the numerical values that it is forecasting, it looks to be more so like a week to getting into moderate territory, which, as we all know, kind of whispers 2004 in our ears, which is precisely what we were looking at yesterday over at WFTV. We were talking a little bit about it. So as it goes without saying, La Nina, we're definitely going to get rid of our El Nino shear. We're going to open up favorability in the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico. And I'm also noticing that our sea surface anomalies do not seem to go anywhere for much of the Atlantic. They stick around. And again, we'll go back in time just a little bit to show you guys. If you look, even valid on the same times, July, August, September, October, we see a bit of a trending down in our sea surface temperatures and a very, very hefty increase in our La Nina. If you guys look in comparison, the shading right through our Enzo regions doesn't change so much, but the coverage has definitely changed. Look at how much deeper the blues are. For the February run, the March run looked about much of the same. The March run showed a very, very dominant, moderate to almost strong La Nina. But then as we've gone through April, notice how the coverage shrinks. We have a little bit more of the warmth out there. And then May, the coverage has shrank even more. So we're still going to be going into a La Nina. But it almost seems like our European model may have been onto something. And now these models are starting to slowly move in that same direction. From a very outlandish, strong, if not an extreme moderate La Nina to more of a weak, moderate-ish, like a more generalized La Nina is how we'll characterize it, which is not really a good thing because we've all experienced that if we live in the Southeast and the Bahamas and the Caribbean. We know what that tends to do for our storms. Here is the North American multi-model as well. And looking at May, like I said, guys, I don't know. I'm really starting to lose faith and confidence that we're going to see anything develop in May. I really don't know. I'm at a loss at this point. We had some signals at the start of the month. Everyone was excited when the latest European seasonal data came out and we got our new CANSIPs, but now it is slowly but surely starting to back off a little bit. And if you notice, even our NMME is still highlighting that we're going to be fairly dry through the Gulf of Mexico, the Southeast, unfortunately. Caribbean, we're slowly seeing some of that moisture boil in, and then all hands on deck as we roll into June. June definitely seems like it could start to really get off to the races quick. Then we have July, open field. August goes without saying. August, once again, I do think is going to be our month here in Central Florida. We're really going to have to keep our eyes open 24/7 as well as through the Caribbean. And I'm still very, very concerned for the Caribbean, and I will use a little bit of sensational terminology. I'm kind of worried about them and alarmed at the patterns that I'm seeing here because everyone keeps talking landfalls. Everyone continues to discuss tropical cyclone pathways. What I'm seeing here is if our rainfall is going to increase, as once again Kevin alluded into the chat, I keep shouting him out, we're going to see a ramping up of our flood threats and our heavy rain threats out there for everybody in Central America and the Caribbean nations because we don't need a tropical cyclone, and they always say, and as they mentioned last year quite a bit, it doesn't need to be a named storm. It doesn't take a named storm. Well, we should probably start warning our folks down there, and even in the Bahamas, that our thunderstorm activity could possibly be off the chain this year, especially in comparison to last year, with the rainy season amping up earlier than later and hanging around longer than leaving sooner. September and October still look like much of the same. October does seem like it's built in a little bit of our moisture anomalies. Let me see. Yeah, so it looks like our moisture anomalies try to hang around. That's been a little bit of a trend. You could see as we've gone through time, I'm going back through the old runs, and it's been fairly consistent that our Caribbean is going to stay moist, but it's also starting to show that we could see some lingering moisture moving up the East Coast and the Southeast. So, Lord willing, what that means is not necessarily tropical impacts, but maybe our rainy season here in Florida, the Bahamas, and the Southeast will linger around a little bit more before La Nina fully heads us into a dry winter, because that's going to be the huge difference. We're not going to have to worry too much about severe weather. We're not going to have to worry about tornadoes like we did with El Nino. In this case, it'll actually be much more quiet and more traditional down here in the Southeast. Here are SSTs. We'll just take a very, very quick glance at them, and we'll look at them across the spectrum here. Let me shrink the page down again once more. So this is May, June, July, August, September, October, and November. And as you can see, a large majority of our SST anomalies out there really don't change very much. They're not going to change a heck of a lot. And honestly, I'm surprised that we saw as much variance as we did during January, February, and March, with it being so hot right now and then dropping down as we went through summertime. That just doesn't make very much sense to me, and it looks like our models are finally coming back to the sensible side of at least maintaining that heat out there in the Atlantic. And God forbid it could maybe even show that we're going to have a lot of mixing, a lot of energy being tapped out by potential thunderstorms and cyclonic activity out there. Who's to say? These are our 06Z GFS ensembles, and I thought it was hilarious that yesterday even Tom Terry and George both look at this as the Goofus model, as opposed to a very, very reliable model. But we're going to start off and look at the ensembles. The ensembles are just a little bit more trustworthy than our general GFS model, the Goofus, as they would call it, or the, what is it called? The Goofy Forecast System, as we like to call it here on the channel. And you know, the ensembles are still signaling at stuff. The ensembles still want to bring in something fairly robust off the Central American coast on the Eastern Pacific side, and I thought this was very interesting as well. The GFS is bringing back a couple of its ensembles out here for the Caribbean and the Southeast. Still trying to bullseye Jamaica, Dominican Republic, and the Bahamas, and we still have a number of those little zigzagging spaghetti lines across Florida. So, you know, we'll see. The GFS sometimes is onto something as a precursor signal, a little bit of a breadcrumb tool more than it is an end-all be-all, and the excitement immediately dissipates when you come over to the European ensembles. You can see the Euro is still favoring some kind of activity out there in the Eastern Pacific, albeit it does look like our ensemble members have dropped off a little bit. Yesterday, our 12Z was definitely a lot more aggressive. And the 12Z actually brought some stuff into the Atlantic side of things, bringing a couple of those little spaghetti lines out into the Western Caribbean. The, what is that called? The, I forget what it's called. The Gulf of, I can't remember the channel here. Oh, the Yucatan Channel. There we go. I don't know why I had a brain fart there. The Yucatan Channel had a couple of members going through there, as well as the Bay of Campeche. But as you go over to today, 0Z, we'll have to just continue to monitor. We're still so far out. If you look, we don't start seeing anything on the East Pac side until 7 days, a little over a week from now. We start to see some signals out there, and then until we start to see any kind of identifying features in the Caribbean or the Gulf of Mexico, we're already at the 300-plus hour out. So lots of time to give this time to marinate, lots of time for it to get its act together. I don't want us to all... Tom Terry said it perfectly yesterday. We don't want to unload our magazine on the first round, you know? We don't need to empty our magazine as quick. So we're still watching. I'm looking at the icon. The icon does fairly well in early developmental phases with these tropical systems. And I'll tell you, you know, the icon is still spinning something up out there. You can see it right there at the very tail end of the chart. That is definitely tropical. This is the 15th of May, and this has been echoed for quite a bit of time, not only on our other models, but on the icon once it has finally gotten in range. So I thought this was interesting. Nothing in the Caribbean, nothing in the Gulf of Mexico. Same thing with our Euro vorticity. You can kind of see where it is our models are thinking something can try to develop out there. You can see some leftover remnant vorticity couplets coming off of South America, moving through the southernmost Caribbean Sea, across Costa Rica, Panama, Nicaragua, and then out into the Pacific. And so it's these little couplets that we'll have to watch for primarily, and you can see how we really get a lot of almost vacuuming, if you will, of energy coming off of Central America, the Yucatan, and Mexico into the Gulf. As the Gulf of Mexico gets warmer, we will want to watch any bit of frontal activity or the tail end of a front that wanders its way through the Gulf of Mexico. That's why I've been looking at our fronts so heavily, not only for severe weather purposes, but obviously just to see if anything is going to try to escape as far south as the Gulf and maybe try to do something with itself. We'll see. Here's our European model surface winds. We're just going to go quickly scroll through because you can see, I mean, there's little residual signs. Little signs that the Euro is trying to do something right about the same exact point as our icon model, too. If we come back to the icon, is this it? No, this is it. See that? Actually, heck yeah, look at that initialization right there, or that verification, I should say, model to model. I have my pen drawn there in exactly the same spot, icon, that's the icon Euro. Icon Euro. And that is, if you guys are watching, that's, shoot, I moved there we go. That's not me touching anything. All I'm doing is clicking tabs, and that is like spot on. And we saw the same thing last year with the icon and the European model. It seemed like those two were really close together in a lot of the development and a lot of the tracks and intensity of our tropical systems, whereas the GFS was All I'm going to do is, and the Canadian model was kind of more or less on track with these two at a later point in time. Canadian model did fairly well with some of our early signals, our early signs. And that's another reason why I'm losing confidence as well, is even the Canadian model, the Canadian ensembles have dropped off a lot of confidence that anything is coming to the Caribbean, which segues me right into that next portion of it. These are our 0Z overnight ensembles. And for a while there, we were seeing something down in through here, south of Jamaica, south of the Cayman Islands, that wanted to scoop itself up and try to move through that Yucatan Channel into the Gulf. As a matter of fact, let's do a little bit of a sanity check. Let's go back to 0Z on Sunday. And if you take it quickly through time, see, there it is. You get little weak anomalies down there that are trying to blossom into something fairly, meh, something worth watching. You have some ensemble agreement out there in the the Eastern Pacific, south of Mexico, wandering westward. If we go to 12Z yesterday, we started to see a little bit of agreement out there in the East Pac, still seeing some very weak members out there in the Caribbean. And then at 0Z, I had taken a glance already just to show you guys, and I mean, there's nothing out there. We have some areas of erroneous low pressure coming off of the United States. We'll have to watch this. I know yesterday our probabilities on the European model, the ensembles, were up there once again at 12 Zulu, but they've since dropped off. We'll look at the probabilities really fast so we can denounce all this. Let's go to the Caribbean, and we'll go to 12Z yesterday first so I can show you guys that. So 12Z yesterday had some signals not only down in the southern Caribbean, but there over top of Florida as that system wanders its way down that we were just looking at. Still some good favorability out there in the East Pac with some rising probabilities getting up into that 30-35 percentile, and then it drops. 0Z, again, I don't know what happens overnight sometimes with these probabilities, but 0Z just does not look very impressive. We've seen a very slight uptick in our East Pac, but then as you look, Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, Zippo, there's nothing out there. Nothing and nothing. No tropical probabilities for a depression, no tropical energy, so there's going to be a lot of back and forth, and don't misconstrue my words either. Just because I'm mentioning that it's quiet, could remain quiet, does not mean that this won't change in the next couple of days. It always has the potential to do that, especially since a lot of us are more or less shooting blanks at the hurricane season. We're not even there yet. It's only May 8th. We still have 24 days to go before the official calendar start of the hurricane season. So naturally, things are going to ebb and flow. Things are going to go back and forth. And it's getting to the point almost where I feel like some of our people out there are fishing for weather. And that's not what we're doing here with these tropical updates. These updates are just simply keeping our eyes open, and I'm communicating to you guys that I'm keeping my eyes open, and these are the things that I'm investigating. And if anything new pops up, that's exactly what these are for, because my gut was very confident we were going to see some preseason development. And I still feel like there is a shot. So that's the main reason I'm not only starting my updates once again, but I'm also starting the updates just to see if that preseason development does end up getting going. We were looking at, I wanted to look at some of our precip for Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic because of what was mentioned in the chat already, and it does look like as we continue to go through time, Puerto Rico is going to be seeing a lot of rainfall, and you can see overall the rainfall is only going to persist for a lot of our islands out there. These are our early signs of what I was mentioning during the climate spiel earlier in the segment, that regardless of tropical activity, our folks down there are going to have to be prepared for flooding and very, very torrential rainfalls as we move through the summertime. And this is only preliminary stuff here. And you can see, obviously, from what we're used to identifying and what we're used to predicting, this doesn't look as big. But the fact that we're already seeing areas, and this is millimeters, guys, so you have to do that conversions to inches, or the conversion to inches. I believe it's, 10 millimeters is an inch, or is it 30 millimeters? I honestly need to, pardon me, I feel like an idiot not knowing that, millimeters to inches. So let's see. Nope, it's 30. Okay, so yeah, it's around 30-ish, 25-ish. We'll say about 27 milliliters or millimeters is what gives you an inch, 25 to 26. And we're already seeing areas, especially in Puerto Rico, Haiti, where they don't need it. They had a lot of activity the tail end of last hurricane season with all of our variations of Vince that snuck up and out of there. We're already seeing values that are getting well beyond the 60, 70 millimeters. So we're looking at 2 to 3 inches of rain over only the next 72 to 96 hours. So 3 to 4 days. We're not looking very long range. If you guys see the legend up here, the toolbar, we're not actually going extremely far in time. This is only up till Saturday, and the European model is forecasting we could see an additional 2 to 3 inches of rain between now and then, possibly more, possibly less, depending on what mechanisms hang out there long enough. These are our lovely long-range European ensembles for the tropics, and I'm still seeing some very interesting signals on here. The control member doesn't really have too much happening out there for the month of May. The control member does have something spinning in the Pacific. So the control member of the Euro long-range ensembles for the next couple of weeks still has confidence that we're going to see a start of the season storm out there for our Eastern Pacific, but not a whole lot lingering out there in the Caribbean. And it isn't until we start to approach the threshold of June do we start to suddenly see a surge in our precip. And like I said, this is where it gets a little interesting, because you notice this is June 7th now. And watch right around the Yucatan Peninsula, the Yucatan Channel, as we get into the middle parts of June. That's been there for a little bit of time now. If you come over to our ensemble member 1, it's still there. If you go to 2, it's not there. If you go to 3, there's something there. If you go to 4, there's something there. If you go to 5, not a whole lot. 6, not a whole lot. But there is something in the MDR, which is very interesting as well. So, it's still a huge toss-up. There are signs and signals that we could get something before the season starts, or we could start to see some of those early season arrivals. Homegrown, as they call them. So we'll just continue to monitor. Even the CFS, I've been looking. We tested this page and block content coming from... Oh, okay, that's a weird little disclaimer up there. Even the CFS, which is what a lot of folks had started to really pay close attention to, has really backed off on tropical activity in the Caribbean. If you guys look, there is a little bit of an indication that something along the trailing edge of this frontal feature on the 17th could form up, but I really don't give this a huge vote of confidence. I'm not going to use this to advertise to people. I'm not going to use this to make tropical predictions, because this model, the sign was we could see some precursor activity, but it has gone from wide left to wide right. And if you look and rewind to the past Saturday and Sunday discussion that we did, there were some pretty big low pressure values starting to pop off in the southern central Caribbean. They're not there anymore at all. They're not there. And it takes not until we get into the back end of May, early June, where we start to see similar signals once again, still bullseyeing Florida. I don't know, maybe this hurricane season has it out for Florida this year, but every single model that does generate something wants to take it right towards Florida. Eastern Pacific, still a little bit of confidence that we're going to see some stuff forming up out there. That level of activity has not tapered off. You can see that 1,006, 1,007 millibar low lining up with what we just looked at on our icon and our European model. So the CFS is still on board. The East Pac is going to get going. Caribbean, very, very big toss-up. Very big toss-up. And I think the main reason why is if we come back to this, notice just how much dry air and lack of activity we have out there. So as long as that dry air and these fronts keep dropping in, at least initially, there's not going to be a whole lot of anything going on. Because if you think about it, with each front comes temperature discontinuity. You've got cold, dry air back behind them. And with every front, you need a jet. So as those fronts come down, at least during the first day or two, they're down there modifying and marinating, as we like to say, stewing in the pot. There's not going to be any real development. Not really. And I've been watching the shear tendencies. They try to open up in the southern Caribbean, but the shear is still very, very unfavorable, not conducive over the Gulf of Mexico, the northern Caribbean. But again, this could change. We've seen model-to-model run changing things up. You could see, as a matter of fact, outside of that one random blip on the CFS that comes smack dab through central Florida, right around the Tampa-St. Pete area too, which is very, very bizarre, there's really nothing out there. And this is now getting into June 8th. Still a very dominant high pressure out there. That's been a signal that hasn't gone away. But, I don't know. The key takeaway here is I'm starting to lose confidence that we're going to get much. And like I said earlier in this briefing, I've been looking at this not only for our severe weather potential, but also just to see what gets down there in the Caribbean. This is our 6Z GFS, and even the GFS has really backpedaled on itself and was forming stuff up. If you go back to 12Z on Tuesday, you see a lot more stuff trying to blossom down there in the Caribbean, some Arlene-style stuff. Same thing with the 0Z 0Z from yesterday. If you look, something trying to get itself together and crash land into Florida. So, development remains to be seen. Am I really confident that we really need to pay close attention to something specific out there? Eastern Pacific, yes. For the Caribbean, I'm watching. I'm watching everything. And right now, there is no specific point in time. There is no specific area that I'm watching. That's how low my confidence has kind of fallen. Like I said earlier, and forgive me for saying that. I got to stop saying like I said. I'm even starting to annoy myself, so I apologize. As stated earlier in this live stream, it was exciting when we got the new model data, and I think maybe that's what we kind of fixated on. Reed Timmer put it pretty well at the start of tornado season. People were latching on to any kind of signature or signal that a tornado outbreak was coming for chasing. And maybe that's what we were doing a little prematurely, even myself included. We've been so on edge and anxious for the season to get here so we can see exactly what type of hot water, no pun intended, we're in. And we're doing more or less the same thing. The chasers were doing it in March, looking at every little piece of the puzzle to determine tornado outbreak. And maybe we're doing the same thing here. It could still happen. It's still early May. We're still a long ways away from the time frame that some of the other meteorologists out there and tropical sources have been highlighting. They're thinking May 20th-ish, the second to last week of May into June is when we'll really need to start paying close attention. And that could be right. We still don't have any reliable model data that can get us close enough in time to really pay close attention to that. So we're in a holding pattern. We're going to keep doing these tropical updates, and I'll continue to keep you guys updated, but my confidence is starting to go down, kind of like the Enzo. I'm going back down towards a neutral, where I'm kind of like, could happen, might not. We're no longer in those hot anomalies where everyone was getting excited, stirring the pot, tropical development right there off of the coast of Florida. That is one thing, though, that does have my eyes wide open. Again, disclaimer, not focusing on one specific storm, not focusing on one specific model, not focusing on one specific time frame or general region. The one thing that does have me kind of just raising eyebrows like, is the fact that every single model that develops something in the Atlantic wants to drive it into Florida. Every single one of them. The Euro ensembles, the few that have come up every now and again, the GFS ensembles, as you guys saw, the Canadian ensembles when they were reflecting something, the CFS, the GFS deterministic, if you look, they've been pointing towards Florida. So I don't know if we should take that as it's coming, we just don't know when, or if there's going to be something that's going to sneak up on us late May. There's still a shot. We're just not quite there yet. And I'll take you down using the GFS as well, and we'll look at exactly why I do think that we're just not quite close enough in time to see if anything is going to happen, because if you look, as our models have gotten closer, and actually, you know what? See, this does make sense. I hadn't looked at this just yet. Nope, never mind. Night and day difference. There was a period of time where the shear was going to back off. It does look like it's loosening up just a little bit, but this upper tropospheric trough, this huge trough anomaly right there, is not really going to be very conducive. That's not going to help us. And maybe that's why also the GFS is backpedaling on what's going to happen out here. But again, key takeaway is all we can do is just watch. That's all we can do. Because look at this, 384 hours out. Even this is kind of reaching, and I almost feel discouraged trying to look at this stuff and communicate realistic expectations to you guys. I mean, you just saw it yourself. If I go back to 0Z on Tuesday, oh, look at that, favorable shear. That's gonna develop something. We got a tropical update. We got to get ready for a storm. And then you go to today, and never mind. So we're just not there yet. We're not close enough in time to get a realistic picture of what our mid-range to long-range environment is going to look like. Looking at models this far out, which is why I'm slowly but surely just getting over the Facebook page that I'm on. I'm on there still because I try to be the voice of reason whenever I can, because there are a lot of comment wars. Someone will post, "Here we go, storm development, Alberto," and then someone will come in and say, "Not going to happen," and I'll kind of play devil's advocate. Likely to happen? Not really. Is it possible? Yes, but, and I'll kind of play the even ground. They were going back and forth, I think it was early yesterday, if not the day before yesterday, because a couple of the folks have been hyping the Euro ensembles, the ones that I was showing you guys that go 40-some-odd days out. They were hyping the ensembles, saying that Alberto is looking to hit Florida. Like they verbatim said, Alberto is looking to hit Florida early June, get ready. And that pissed a number of people off, including myself. That's not something you want to say this early before the hurricane season. You don't want to start saying stuff like that. You're going to lose your credibility. The folks who do buy into the hype, the folks who do like to get a little scared, they may follow you. But at the same time, you could tell them a Category 5 is coming on May 13th at 4:30 in the afternoon, and just for the sake of the sensation, they're going to be like, "Oh, we got to go get toilet paper and duct tape." The folks who really do pay close attention and want that accurate, realistic perspective, they're going to tune you out, and that's where it gets dangerous. And I've talked to other folks behind the scenes about this on Instagram, through email. We don't need that to happen. It's going to be very difficult to decipher who is just excited to see this historic season go off and who is really keeping it real and keeping things level-headed. I will tell you guys, just as other reliable sources out there will tell you guys, when we are confident that something is going to form. Sometimes there are folks out there who are fairly reliable, who are confident that something's going to form, and it doesn't happen. It sneaks up on us. This is a very tricky season, and even Tom Terry himself told me that yesterday. He loves hurricane season because it is one of the more challenging forecast periods to get through, and you just never know. It always throws you for a loop. Every season is different. Every storm is different, and I have a newfound respect for tropical meteorology after having that conversation with him yesterday. So we just have to keep our eyes open, our heads on a swivel. That's the big thing in a nutshell. A tropical storm in June is likely, but at the same time, we can't. I personally am not going to utilize climatology too much. It is still a wonderful tool, but because of the fact that we have so many anomalies, and the name anomaly, if you guys aren't really in tune with what the pure definition of an anomaly is just a difference. That's it. It's a difference. An anomaly is a unique detail in the general flow. I can even pull up the dictionary definition just to be on the safe side so you guys know what I'm communicating. What is an anomaly? When something is unusual compared to similar things around it. And the only reason I bring this up, and we're going to go almost English vocabulary lesson, is because the way I'm treating this hurricane season, everybody keeps showing us anomalies, 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 anomalies. That's it. And what I think a lot of folks are falling into is they're starting to believe that anomaly is normal. Oh yeah, that definitely means tropical storm. That means tracks this way. That means this and that. What this tells me, and I'm looking at it in the textbook definition of it, things are unusual, so we're probably going to see some unusual responses to the fact that we're in a very unusual period. Ben Knoll has been sharing routine updates of his super blend of the Euro and the UK Met seasonal outlooks, and we've never seen anything like this before. I have it saved on here, as a matter of fact. I shared it on my X. I'm trying to get a little bit more active on there as well, just because we're getting into, again, at WFTV, they say the Super Bowl of weather. We're getting into that. We're getting into the playoffs, and eventually when that big hurricane forms, we're in the Super Bowl. Everybody is talking about it. These were the anomalies for 2020. And this is why I say we're in very, very strange territories. This was 2020, our most active. If you ever want to put the words hurricane season and historic together, 2020 is it. This is 2024. The writing's on the wall. If 2020 is the benchmark, the staple season most people love to use as historic, the number one analog that people will look at, whether they're meteorologist or just tropical fan or just someone who likes to look at weather every now and again on their pastime, they will always remember 2020. It is synonymous with historic hurricane season. And for the fact that our historic hurricane season was showing this, and a season we haven't even gotten into yet is showing almost triple, if not quadruple, the anomalies, I think it's safe to say we could possibly see some very weird things this hurricane season. And that's what I'm going to be treating it as. I'm going to explore every possibility. Am I probably going to get in trouble with a lot of the folks who are on their straight and narrow path? Absolutely. I've already gotten myself into hot water. People are already commenting now that we've started our tropical updates once again. They're mentioning, why are you doing this? Why are you looking at that? And it's like, well, because my inner meteorologist is telling me we are not in the norm. We are not in the norm. So we need to start thinking outside the box when generating theories, generating forecasts, generating perspectives. If we try to stay in the norm, we might just go astray because things are not normal as the textbook definition suggests out there. With so many anomalies growing and exponentially compounding anomalies, things are unusual. That's the key word right there, unusual, compared to similar things around it, irregular. So we need to start looking at irregularities in the way the season behaves. So time will tell. Time will tell. Like I said, there's still some things out there that are signaling Caribbean Gulf of Mexico action. My confidence is fairly low for the time being, and it's going to do that. It's going to go up and down. It's going to go up and down. We're basically riding Shikra or Montu or whichever roller coaster you prefer out there at your theme park of choice. We're riding it together right now. We're going to be going up, 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 getting ready for the big drop, and then we're going to do it all over again. It's like re-ride after re-ride at your theme park and roller coaster of choice. Still going to be maintaining a vigilant eye on the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Eastern Pacific. I would not be surprised if when we get to May 15th and NHC turns itself on again, we start to see our yellow blips. We'll definitely start seeing yellow blips. Stay away from conspiracy theories. There is no climate change. It's called weather okay. Not interested in pseudoscience, cultish stuff. See, as I study all this stuff and I dig into the finite details, I'm slowly but surely, without the politics involved, starting to buy into climate change a little bit. I really am. Not necessarily only as a negative result, but just looking at the cyclic patterns across the United States, across the Atlantic, across the globe, I do think climate change is a thing. I really do. And that's, if you can hear me say that, and not immediately think presidents, politics, etc. If you can strip that away and just keep an open mind and think weather and climate, I can see climate change being a real thing. Maybe not as extravagant as some of the folks out there who love to hype it, but let's put it this way, and I've been thinking about this, especially taking some of the water resources hydrology classes that I have in school. It just makes sense, logically speaking. If you have an area out here, for example, in Haines City that was once grass, trees, naturally occurring wildlife, and you obliterate that and put streets, buildings, and people, naturally that biome, that ecosystem is not going to play the same role on the overall environment as it once did. We have all industrialized stuff there. We have pollution now entering the picture. So I can buy into there being adjustments and changes in our overall global patterns. So, well, obviously climate isn't weather. That is definitely for certain. Climate is an extended period of time and is what the weather pattern typically looks at given a certain period of time of the year to give you the lackluster answer. And climate is bottled up into huge periods of time, which is why, again, I'm kind of saying climate change could definitely be a real thing, just naturally because of the changes on Earth, especially since we have so many different variables out there constantly moving, constantly evolving, constantly changing. So I'm becoming a believer in it. I'm not becoming a believer in the politics. This is not political. I am not being political. I'm not being religious. I am a faithful religious follower. I have my faith and I love my praising of God, and I go to church and I will always serve him. But this does not come from a political or religious or whatever perspective. This comes from a scientific perspective. And the more I dig into the science and the logic behind it, I do believe that things are going to start to get more anomalous as we go on. Whether it go forwards or backwards, that's another thing. I'm not alluding to global warming. I said climate change. I didn't say global warming. Got you. Whoever was getting ready to blow me up, global warming is wrong. It's like, I didn't say global warming. I said climate change. And I'm going to leave it at that. So we're going to get ready to wrap the live stream. It is 9:55. I got to start getting ready to get started with work. Thankfully, no more school for at least a month, so I can probably give that time back to either myself and studying for you guys and then putting it into content, or I can just give it back in the form of content. We'll see. It'll probably be both hands. It'll probably go hand in hand. I'll probably take the time I would have been using to do homework and class assignments to just continue to do my own meteorological studying. Very excited, though, because in semester, or for the summer and fall semester, all meteorology. No more prereqs, no more things I couldn't do when I was in the Air Force. It's all meteorology. So from here on in, I'm only going to speed up my education in meteorology. And this is going to be great OJT experience, and especially if I can activate and mobilize with the Navy, just even more experience. So I appreciate everybody out there for talking with me today and hanging out with me to talk tropics. I know today was a little bit more on the relaxed side. There really isn't anything to pay close attention to. I'm sorry if you're tuning in and expecting us to be diving into something specific. We're not there yet, and we're not going to be. You know, this is the time of year where we're looking for our early signs of the hurricane season. We're not predicting Hurricane Lees and Hurricane Otises and whatnot. We're just kind of looking at patterns, we're looking at the setup, we're looking at what's coming, because we're close enough now in time to see what the future has in store for us. We're not close enough to really forecast it and get a really accurate representation of it, if that makes sense. January, February, March, we're far away to where it's all speculation. Now that we're getting through towards the middle of May, it's more or less like, okay, we're starting to see what's ahead. We still don't have a full picture of it, but we're starting to get a grasp on it, and we're starting to see a more realistic expectation. Yeah, Vince is probably going to circle around 7 different times this hurricane season. And Mike's stuff and things, I do agree with that as well. Humans are probably expediting it. That's what I've always said. Humans are definitely increasing the rate with which change occurs, because we're just, it's in our nature, no pun intended. Thank you all once again for being a wonderful audience. We will see you again on Friday morning for a tropical update. Unless things change. If we do start to see sudden increases in trends and the classic signals, as I like to say, the little nudges, then we'll talk. But otherwise, we're just going to continue keeping on, or we're going to keep on keeping on. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here on the channel at 9 o'clock in the morning. And you can follow me on Instagram, X, and TikTok for your day-to-day updates and your little fun tidbits of information that I'm examining and scrutinizing behind the scenes when I'm not here on camera with you guys. And I hope you've had a great week so far. It is Wednesday, hump day. I hope Wednesday treats you all spectacularly and everything is good and great in your neck of the woods, in your world. And thoughts and prayers definitely for the folks out there just getting blasted by these tornadoes. And it's a necessary beast, unfortunately. It's a necessary evil. You know, kind of going back to what Mike's Stuff and Things said. The more we urbanize, the more we industrialize, the more these very, very catastrophic impacts are likely to occur. It's going to be the same thing with hurricane season. That's why the etymology is it only takes one, because we are so built up economically, infrastructure-wise, along the coast in hurricane-prone areas that when one storm comes through, it's a catastrophe, it's a disaster, because there's so many people there. That was the final exam project I did in my water resources class, how Florida's overpopulation is putting the state's natural resources, its water resources, in a strain. And it's only going to continue to get worse. So, you never know. But that's neither here nor there. we're just going to keep on keeping on. Ladies and gentlemen, you guys are always awesome, phenomenal. Thank you to everybody who's coming back from last hurricane season. Thank you to my big time and long-term followers, and a big thank you to all my new fans and subscribers out there. Thank you very much for joining our weather community. It is going to be a fun ride this hurricane season as we dive into what anomalies lie ahead in terms of the season and what kind of storms and tracks and impacts we might see, especially once it comes time to get in the trenches and intercept, because I will intercept at least one hurricane this year. There will be an eye-wall hurricane or an eye-wall intercept, and I don't want to hear anybody out there hit me with the looks weak. Looks weak. Nothing's no. We're going head first into the belly of the beast. Can promise you that. First chance I get. So, that's that. Hope everything is great in your world, guys, and we'll talk to you again very soon. But until then, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.